picking a framework for your language to do its intended purpose has become the default, then your language is bad.
Disagree.
Okay, so you're not a developer, you're a Spring Boot engineer.
Kind of weird, but it's not bad.
No, it's an opportunity to sit there and talk about air disasters for 2 hours while we're waiting on status updates.
A little bit of framework talk, a little bit of getting back into the industry again, and the beauty of programming. Just like that, we are live. All right,
Sweet.
This is the DevSync episode 4. We made it past 3, so this is a huge milestone. Big congrats to everybody. Awesome. So last time we were short, Will, so we changed up the topics a little bit. Eric and I ended up talking more about getting into dev and some of our dev experience history, and then kind of everything around that. It got a little broad, I guess, as far as like interviews and that kind of thing. So we might actually return back to that to get Will's take on that. I know that was something we had talked about last time, so we may touch on that. And then this time we were talking about finally getting into framework wars. So that was something we had started talking about last couple episodes ago, and go from there. So I think it all spawned from a hot take, but let's start with a hot take then. I think that was what we had talked about last time. Let's start cooking with gas right off the bat. Will, you got a hot take for us?
Yeah, so there's lots of languages out there. To name a few, there's Rust, Go, JavaScript, Java, C#, Python, PHP, right? And the reason why I list off those, because off the top of my head, a lot of those have frameworks written for them, right? Obviously, a lot of people understand the most common frameworks are JavaScript ones like React, Vue, Angular, Next.js, all these big, powerful, crazy frameworks. And my hot take was essentially, if your language, which is created, invented, right? No language is a silver bullet. So a language is usually created for an intended purpose. Like JavaScript's intended purpose was, browser, and Go was cloud, Java was internet, right? All these things. If you have a language that was created for an intended purpose, and that language has to handicap or lean or rely on a community-made framework to be usable or accepted, and examples like that, like if you want to create a Java project, you don't. You create a Spring Boot project. If you want to create a PHP project, you don't. You create a Laravel project, right? And JavaScript has infinite frameworks to choose from, so don't even have to go down that list. So if that is the path forward, or if that's the default, like if picking a framework for your language to do its intended purpose has become the default, then your language is bad.
So if your language needs a framework, it is bad. All right, Eric?
Disagree.
There's a hot take.
Yeah. Nah. I mean, like, I think I get where you're coming from, right? Everybody always wants to build back to core. But I think there's a barrier to entry aspect of snapping to the core framework. That you look at some of the frameworks that have existed over the years, right? They, especially the JavaScript ones, come to mind. I mean, I think we were talking about Angular, and I was actually just talking to somebody about previous versions of Angular versus new versions of Angular, and it's like just night and day, right? When you look at like the newer versions of Angular, it's common. Not common, similar to other JavaScript frameworks of that level of popularity and usage. Right? They follow the same kind of patterns and things like that. They have different internals and whatnot, right? But
did Angular have like a big update recently or something?
Good question. I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't used it in a while. Like this all came up because we were just reminiscing about like Angular 1.4 from like 10 years ago, or however long it was, and just how far it's come since then. And then just talking about like web component frameworks, which then reminded me we were going to talk about this, which then I got fired up to talk about this, and look forward to arguing for the next hour.
Right on.
Anyway, long story short, I see where you're coming from, Will. I think I'm going to stick by that barrier to entry argument for a second of just, adopting to get to your end result, which is not usually to build some kind of like sysinternal, I'm not trying to rebuild an HTTP server, or I need to make a REST call to this API that I'm using for some purpose. Like maybe I can just use REST. I don't need to get in there and actually establish sockets and handles and interpret the bytes and all that kind of jazz. So that's I think that would be kind of my first level argument.
Yeah. So framework and library are different. You can use libraries, right? Like if I have a project and I don't want to deal with the base package client and router and HTTP handler and all that stuff, and it is too verbose. It is too weird, and there's just things that it doesn't do well. Maybe it doesn't catch errors properly, or it requires a lot of try catches or craziness. So I don't use the base package. I pull down a library. That's different than a framework, right? You're using reusable code that kind of wraps around a certain component in the base package and establishes, a little bit of friendlier barrier to entry. But the framework takes it to a whole other level, right? Like you look at, again, just Spring Boot to me is the worst of all of them because there's so many annotations and black box magic that get done in Spring Boot that you have no idea what's actually happening. That as a developer, if you're trying to learn programming, if you're trying to learn how to build a service, you're going to take Java, build a Spring Boot project, and then join, say, like a Rust team. And you're going to be like, wait, Rust doesn't have annotations? Then how am I supposed to make a config file? It's like, what do you mean you just make a config file? I don't know how to make a config file. All I do is put ampersand config and it's done. It's like, okay, so you're not a developer. You're a Spring Boot engineer. Like,
An annotator.
Yeah, you're just an annotator. Like you're not learning anything. And the leaning on the framework to do your job for you, I think just weakens your ability as a developer.
Maybe let's start there then, right? Because you actually just touched on something. I hope we come back to it later, and that's around platform developers.
Okay.
Because we kind of got into it last week a little bit, right, Jay, when we were talking about just like general engineering knowledge or the engineering mindset, right, is way more important than being expert in a thing.
Okay.
For getting started, right? Anyway,
Sure.
we're going to start with this. So I'm going to use Resty because I know you know what that is. Is that a library or a framework?
Sorry, you cut out. What? Rest what?
Resty.
Oh, Resty. I would say that's a library.
I
So you
actually don't
kind
know what Resty is.
It's just like a REST client for Go.
For Go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like I use GoChai, which is another
Ah.
library in my opinion.
Use Chai.
Gotcha.
Okay. I think that's a key distinction here because I mean from a learning aspect, do you learn the internals or do you learn you get the broad learning mechanism of the HTTP lifecycle by using something like a Resty, where it's just kind of like, hey, give me these 3 or 4 things, and I will do the rest and package it all up into these internals, and then fire off fire off the call. You don't have to worry about sockets and same thing we were just talking about, right? TCP clients and all that. It's just it's taking care of all of those things, as opposed to like this is where I'm kind of trying to figure out where your line is. Like, what's your line for what a framework is above and beyond that?
Yeah. So how I view a framework, and there's obviously a lot of probably really good written out technical definitions that I could probably be using instead. But instead of looking that up, I'm just going to speak from what I'm thinking. I see a framework as a whole shift in syntax, stylistic approach, and then you can even go the real crazy route, like what JavaScript does, where your folder structure is like powerful. Like your folder structure actually has impact on your code and your architecture. Like just titling a folder changes the whole architecture. Now you have like something completely different. It's like, wow, okay, like that's a little nuts to, like frameworks have those powers or those black boxes or, auto magic abilities. And that's like obviously the highest and most complicated frameworks, but not all of them have that stuff. But that's what I mean, right? Versus a library, it's like you're still in the code, you're still in the language, you're still using mostly base package, lower level stuff, but you're not like rewriting anything. Like you don't have to manage bytes and sockets. Just use the standard base package. Or if that's a little too much, then you just use a library to help you, like Resty or GoChai. Like Express, great library, not really a framework. I think that's just a good library to use for Node.js. But if you were to make a Next.js app, that's a framework.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
That's an interesting distinction. You had me on your side, which I'm gonna be honest with you, I was kind of hoping you're just going to go into syntax sugar anyway, because as soon as you mentioned the attributes of like a Spring Boot app, or like I'm totally with you on that, right? I mean, yeah, and you asked a great question. Who knows what that does? That's what principal engineers are for, man. That's how you get there. You can navigate your way through this 800 meg Java monolith. It's broken out into 7,000 namespaces and packages. Nope. Express is a library.
Yeah, because there's other ones right? There's more than just Express to make a web server in Node. It's not like the only way to do it.
So it's almost because Express kind of really focuses on just one functionality, then it's more so a library as opposed to Next, where it's taking the whole language and restructuring it.
Yeah, again, it's like you're still writing Node in the end, right? Like you're still, now I know Node is weird because now they have like different packages, right? I forget the naming, but there's like you don't just use import statements. Now there's from statements, and then there's like import and from, and you have to make it either a module or non-module, and it's
Yeah,
like
the whole module
now
thing.
it's
Okay.
like really messed up. But
Right.
back in the day when it wasn't that way, you really could just like write Node, and then right next to it would be Express code. Like it just was fine. You didn't have to change your whole project when you imported Express. Like you didn't npm install Express and then your whole thing broke. Versus that would happen with Spring Boot, and that would happen with Next.js, and that would happen without, because if it doesn't adhere to the structure of the framework, or if it doesn't adhere to the standards of the framework, it won't work. You have to completely do a whole mental shift and like reprogram things to fit how it wants it to be done.
Yeah.
Okay, so more modularity. Got it.
It is interesting because I mean you can definitely find people who try to add that sort of rigid structure to Express apps.
Yeah, I mean, of course, people will have their opinion on how a Node.js should be structured and how a Node.js, but like that's the thing is like it doesn't have to be, and it'll still run. It'll work, and you can take whatever you can make one JavaScript file, right? Just one, the whole app in one file, and it will run just as smooth as someone who has an model view controller folder structure, right? Like it doesn't actually adhere to anything, but frameworks do. Like Spring Boot, bringing model view controller into it, like that's kind of who made it famous. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the first time I ever saw very rigid MVC formatting was in Spring Boot apps. And if you don't do that, then the app just won't work.
Yeah, I think for me it's just like if there's an underlying set of shared services that individual modules of your app are consuming or must adhere to, right? There's some kind of back in the old Angular days, it was the digest cycle, right? Everything you did had to be aware of where you were in the digest cycle. And that's how you kind of made everything work. I mean, there was ways to do dependency injection, right? That was my first foray into dependency injection was these old Angular projects. And that's where I totally agree with you, man. That is a framework, right? But not because of like folder structure or anything like that. I think that's just inherent to the build system, which Java build systems. Whew. But that set of shared services that like all of those modules that you've built, they have to adhere to this thing in order to work. That's what's interesting about. That's why I kind of took a step back for a second when you said Express, because it's like there are aspects of Express that if you want to use them, you have to adhere not necessarily to folder structure, but there's like middleware, for instance, right?
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, and I think that's fine because it's just, again, I think to me that's just a library that has certain definitions, certain structs, certain interfaces, and in order to use them, you have to obviously follow their architecture or their boilerplate or blueprint is probably the better word, or else it just won't work, right? It just errors. But besides that, like you can drop an Express middleware and it will work in anyone's project because Express doesn't overhaul or change the entire fundamental structure of said project. So.
Right. I mean, it's like anything dependency injection or just general contract-based development. You implement a thing that takes in a request and a response, and you manipulate those things like you did. Yeah. And there's something to be said for those single-file Express apps.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it should be, right? You minify your JS anyways into one file. So
I mean, yeah, but I even mean like non-minified. There's something to be said about that. We get a little too crazy with hiding stuff in folders.
Yeah. So I guess it's not so hot of a take. Seems like everyone's in agreement.
I guess so. I mean,
it makes sense, right?
Yeah. And then I think to like take it further, the ramification or the way to fix it is you just improve the base package of the the language. Like if the language is missing a really good HTTP client and server and middleware and like handler methods and just like what Express does, like if JavaScript lacks that core functionality out of the box and it really hinges on libraries or frameworks to do it for them, then just improve the language to do that. and then people will stop using the libraries. Now, not obviously overnight, but like over time, people will learn JavaScript because, you know, there's new developers every day. They'll learn JavaScript. They'll get used to using the, let's say, JavaScript methods instead of Express, and then those will become the future, and Express will slowly like disappear. But they will never ever do that if Express is always better, and it will always be better unless they update the language, and at least in not those areas, right? So
True. I think there's something to be said for what was the intended purpose when the language was built.
yeah,
And what is it?
and that's why I hinted on that too, because like not every language is a silver bullet. So you don't need to update the standard package to do literally everything. Like not every language has to cross barriers and collide with each other across all ways of programming. Like, you know, like we can keep Python in Python land and Go in Go land and JavaScript in JavaScript land. They don't have to merge, but when they're living there, doing their intended purpose, like make it good, improve the language to do a good job versus hinging on giant frameworks that are bloated and complicated and, you know, all that.
Okay, so then this is I think where it started to probably get a little spicy. So then what do you do with something like Django, or when you have Python to be running a web app where it's like, Python's not really intended for that, but I want to do
I
it
wouldn't
anyway.
recommend it. I would say if you want to build a web app, don't use Django. Like it's not what it's intended for. There's a lot better languages and in today's day and age frameworks that will do it a lot faster, a lot easier, more natively, right? Because like JavaScript runs in the browser, not Python. So, you know, stuff like that.
Okay, so no Google declaring that Python is the default browser language or anything like that. I think that was what sparked it last time. Was it all right? Google says Chromium only runs whatever.
Oh, yeah. I was basically
Angular
saying like,
syntax.
yeah, like if Google decided that the only possible way to write a component in the browser was to use Angular, yeah, like they forced adoption basically.
Yeah, I forgot about that part. That would be
Because that argument was more that there's too many frameworks and they're all 80 to actually probably more 90% the same. And if they're all so close, they're all almost identical, then like let's just all make one super framework. And then hopefully, you know, long term, you get rid of the framework and it just becomes native JavaScript. And there is no framework. It's just all part of the base package. So
yeah, I guess it wasn't that like the whole thing about Go though. I remember, yeah, I don't know. You're saying like that was the big thing about Go is like, oh, it's, you know, pure Go. You shouldn't use anything else. It should just be standard library. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, right? Because using Chai and Resty and some of these other frameworks / library.
Well, I wouldn't say any of them are frameworks. They're definitely libraries, but I don't think there's a single framework that I would ever use or recommend. I know there is a, I think it's called Go View. It's the first framework I've ever stumbled across where it actually looks like a Vue project, but instead of it being JSX, it's Go and HTML, like kind of using Go's HTML render base package. I think REPL is in there somehow as well, which is another popular Go framework for rendering HTML and all that stuff. But anyways, it is like a framework where you do not code Go normally in Vue Go or Go Vue, whatever it is, because it's supposed to be like using Vue, the JavaScript framework, but Go is your backend, not Node.js, right? So it's a way different way of approaching your project, a way different way of building a website. But I wouldn't recommend using it, and I've never used it. I've always just used Go, standard base package or libraries here and there.
I was doing a little Googling on the side here just to kind of see what happens when we, let's see.
Did you find GoView?
I was just looking for Golang frameworks just to see kind of what happens, but 12 million results come up from Golang frameworks. So lots of other people call them frameworks. So it was more so just going to point out it's probably just more so of a terminology thing. You would define it as a framework, and that term may be a little bit more broad than, or if you want to get into like semantics, I guess, about the definition.
Yeah.
But like then best web server framework, I see.
Yeah.
Chai,
see, I think
Echo Gin. Yeah.
Yeah, those would be libraries, right? Then it just comes down to terminology, right? You could also say package because technically Go doesn't use libraries; they use packages, you know.
Okay.
Or modules with Go mod, right? They're modules and packages, which is other terminology that Go uses that's different than even these other ones that we're hearing. So, you know what I mean? It's like NPM, again, uses modules, NPM module, right? So it's all the same thing. I think the big distinction is all of those versus framework. To me, framework is different, but library, package, module, um, I don't know, cargo, right? Rust uses cargo, right? Like all of those is the same, but to me, framework is way more something bigger, like much more complicated.
Yeah, and that's I think that was where I definitely agreed with you from that standpoint, that it's like Go has things that will modify certain functionality, but then you have something that comes along in JavaScript where you have a framework like React, like Next.js, like Vue, whatever, that's really trying to change the entire language basically and how it works, as opposed to just cleaning up some other functionality that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Eric, puzzled looks. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of, like, I mean, do you basically just say like, well, Go shouldn't be used for a web server ever?
No, it's a back end, but it doesn't need to, it doesn't need to, like, for example, the Vue Go project, I explored it out of pure curiosity because I thought it was cool, and it is fun, and it's cool to build those projects, and people should explore ways to do that, right? Test every language to its limits, and definitely, like, open source rocks. So go at it, have fun. But looking at that project, like, if I'm going to build a website and I'm going to write the HTML, the JavaScript, and then the backend for it, and the backend's going to connect to a database, right? Or reach out to a database, maybe on the cloud or whatever, right? And this is something I'm going to want to do in one repo, one place that has all this code. I'm going to have a JavaScript project, and then next to that, a Go project. And I'm going to write standard Go with my favorite libraries as a backend. The backend's going to handle all the API routes through a REST API or whatever, and it's going to do what it needs to do. And then the JavaScript project will be totally separate. The build system will be separate. The shipping system will be separate. Everything will be separate. Versus Vue Go was the attempt to make it all one, just like all these other projects do with Next.js and Vue and React and all that. Like, it's to combine the front end and the back end next to each other. So you write the backend function in the same file you're writing the HTML, right? That's something I wouldn't do. But you can still have Go as a backend web server for sure, 100%.
I mean, that was like kind of the promise of MVC, right? Was you had your model view, and your controller on your views, right? Then they brought in model, was it view model?
Yeah, but like Vue Go attempts to do what Vue does, where it creates components that render dynamically, reactively, like what all these components do, versus instead of server side rendering, it is still using client side. Like, obviously Java Spring is all just server side, which is different.
But I mean, at the end of the day, right, what we're talking about here is you've got this server that is taking a request based on what you've told it. It is going to hand something back to your browser, right? End of the day, that's all your Go server is going to do. Now, if all your templates and everything happen to just be in the same sort of compiled binary, maybe that's like, maybe there's a performance optimization aspect to that that's very attractive. Like, there's no reason to split out things just because, if you don't.
Well, I would only split out if you are okay with server side rendering, then yeah, don't split out. But if you're not, then you have to. I don't think there's another option.
Well, not necessarily server side. Well, when you say server side rendering, you mean like the building of the HTML and the JavaScript that's all getting sent back?
Yeah, like you're sending the whole page back in the like, it's the whole page is being made in the server and then sent back to the client, versus the client is dynamically building, adapting with the DOM and the virtual DOM, the shadow DOM, and all these crazy terminologies, right?
Oh, okay. I mean, I'm kind of with you on that one. I mean, but at the end of the day, like, once again, just from a pure HTTP standpoint, right? Request, the response is something.
Yeah.
Something could be, it might very well be an entire HTML page with a whole bunch of component definitions and then rendered out JavaScript modules that then render into components and all that kind of jazz. That to me is like, if you're not doing it through something like Vue with templates and things like that, it's still the same basic premise, though.
But that's server side rendering, which
I mean,
not
like,
everyone
that's
wants.
Just standard, like HTTP. That's just like a web server. Index.html. It hands me index.html. That's not server side rendering. That could just be static file serving.
Yeah, I'd say a static file server is also server side rendering. I'd say those are interchangeable.
Interesting.
Okay.
That does kind of blur the lines a little bit. When is a hot dog, is a hot dog a sandwich or not?
Oh,
because
man,
like
great episode topic.
There's that'll be later. But yeah, I guess it's at some point, if it's only technically rendering static files, then it's server-side rendering. Yeah, interesting.
I mean, it's not necessarily rendering though. It's just like serving, I guess. I don't know. Maybe we're talking semantics here,
Yeah.
but like if I have an index.html, and you see this a ton, if you go and you look at like login pages for popular platforms that are out there, you actually look at the HTML that comes back in the index.html or the index.whatever, ASPX.JSP, whatever it might be. It's going to basically be like an HTML tag, a whole bunch of JavaScript includes, and then some sort of bootstrapping JavaScript call, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
It might be redirecting you somewhere. It could be just bootstrapping the components on the page. It might be doing whatever. But that to me, I don't know, is that rendering? I would not have called it that. But now I want to read more into kind of.
I think there's like hybrid models, right? I think you have your standard, which is client side, server side, and then a little bit in between where like some components, let's say every time you navigate to a new page, that's server side, but every time you change something on the page, it's client side. So there's like a little bit of a hybrid. That's like your 3 standards. And then obviously there's enterprise. And enterprise likes to reinvent the wheel over and over and over, and they create their own custom solution that fits, their compliance or their needs or whatever, right? And so that's when you get like all these outlier things. Like you're not technically rendering it. All you're sending is a bunch of JavaScript, and then when it hits the client, it renders. Right. But then it only renders unless there's a WebAssembly module with it, and it's like then it's pulling down stuff from the cloud all at once through CDN, right? So it's like, so what's really happening at that point, right? You have CDN, WebAssembly, server, and client side. I don't know.
I mean, yes, right?
Yeah. So like,
I mean, back in the day, everything was postback model, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You click a button, and that entire form or whatever, usually a form.
Yep.
It's sent back to the server. Server does a thing, and then basically returns a state, and everything just updates. Now, everything you talk about, even just page navigation, everything is, single page app. How much is really happening? So then you just, I don't know, because the browsers are so good now, I guess, for lack of a better word, powerful. Like you can alleviate so much of that control just to the browser, right? And because we have such strong security mechanisms for API calls, and it doesn't take forever for the JavaScript runtime to process things, and you thank jQuery for that, I guess. I don't know. I don't really remember all that happening until jQuery came on the scene and popularized Ajax and.
So that then that kind of led to the reactification of everything. That everybody got tired of the static rendering, so it's like, all right, cool. Like I guess, and that was probably essentially what happened, right? Like the personal device, could Facebook at least started figuring out, it's like, hey, we could rely on the client browser to just like handle a lot more work than it used to, and then like you said, in a safe way. And then I think we just got stuck in that world for a long time, and then now, like Will was saying, there's kind of been a lot of in between solutions. It's kind of like started to balance that a little bit, where it's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't do all of the rendering and have to get into all the Shadow DOM, Virtual DOM, all that craziness. So then HTMX was born and returned back to the glory days. Have you looked into HTMX yet, Eric?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
It's cool. It's fun.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty fun.
But nothing's a silver bullet.
But exactly. Yeah.
No, I mean, it had its. I get it, right? Like,
it's simple. Like to me, it's almost nostalgic to know that you're not losing. I mean, there are some functionality that it can't do that, say, React can do, obviously. But if you're just building a basic website and you can use React for it, and you think for maybe just a few seconds, like, I want to go back to the good old HTML days and just use, standardized tags. Like HTMX could be the solution because it can probably do what you want to do with it. And to me, it's like a fun, nostalgic, blast from the past. Just do everything in nice HTML with some JavaScript and CSS, and you're off to the races and you're done. Nothing more complicated. Nothing, that you have to do with npm React build, npm React, minify or whatever. So,
for sure.
HTMX. They call them hooks, I think is what they're called.
Yeah, the like X dash.
Yeah.
For X dash in whatever.
See, that to me, it seemed like a little bit of syntax sugar. I get your point on the nostalgia piece of this, Totally.
Yeah, it's
You want to
yeah.
go full nostalgia though? You go old school. You create a CGI bin folder,
Oh man,
and you
yeah.
get yourself a Perl script in there. Okay. You want to post to something? You post it.
There you go.
Like the
No
rest.
CSS. That's full nostalgia.
That's right.
White page, black text, no formatting.
Oh man.
Whatever you can do in pure HTML. Marquee tags galore.
Oh man, that's right. Wow. Yeah.
No
Remember
responsive
before
design.
grids?
Yeah.
I was gonna say
Oh.
before grids and before Flexbox, everyone made the
Tables.
entire web page a table,
Oh yeah.
and then
Oh.
use table cells
Ugh.
as your
Ugh.
grid.
Who are you telling? I can show you my college projects that are exactly that.
Yeah, I just
Yes.
I can't believe that was the standard for a while. That was like just
all
that's
you had.
crazy. That
Yeah.
was wild.
Tables all the way down. It was
Yep.
awful. It was
All
awful.
tables.
Yeah.
And then you put a little banner at the bottom that would say optimized for Internet Explorer 800 by 600.
Oh
Just
man.
tell you,
Yeah.
change your resolution for this web page
Yeah.
if your monitor will support it.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
Craziness.
good old days.
Flash player must be installed.
That's right. Yes.
Oh man, I mean no CSS. I want to wax poetic about something. Imagine debugging CSS before DevTools came in, and you could actually see the
Yeah.
hierarchy and what was being overridden. And
Yeah.
nope.
Oh yeah. Had to like change all the colors and just to be able to visualize like what's actually happening. Yeah. That was
Glad I missed that.
right.
I was right on the edge.
I joined web dev right when Dreamweaver was popular, so I got a pretty good entrance experience because I used Dreamweaver and I thought it was awesome. So I didn't have to suffer too much.
I was a front page guy.
Mhm.
Early days. There's a lot of SharePoint stuff too, though, which front page just kind of went right into SharePoint Designer. But same basic premise, right? Like WYSIWYG editor, client app, thick client, hit a publish button, thing showed up somewhere.
Nice.
Nice. Oh man.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was Eclipse, the Eclipse IDE version, and jQuery, and then that's pretty much it. Then made it look as pretty as I could with that. So yeah, a lot of monitors and a lot of testing. I was very jealous of Dreamweaver. We were not using that. That was not a company standard. So it's just like, man, that would probably make things a lot easier. But I got really good at guessing, pixel sizes and stuff. So
Oh, dude. I saw a meme the other day that hit so hard where it was like back end engineers doing front end and he had like his finger measuring the pixels on the monitor, doing gaps and stuff. Like
yeah.
that, like knowing, but I did that. Like I thought that made sense. Like I was like, well, why would it be different on any other monitor? Like,
Right.
what are you talking about? Everyone has the same pixels. It's like, yeah.
Thank God for REM. Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally did that.
Oh yeah, been there. Yeah, when you suddenly move it to another screen, it's like, I had no idea it looked like this on another size. This is awful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Been
crazy.
there for sure. Well, actually, that was a nice segue because we were gonna maybe jump into that a little bit with Will's getting into the industry. So Eric and I we kind of started talking about that if you were a new dev and trying to get advice on like how to get into the industry, if you're going to become a dev, do you think it's even worth it? I mean, is AI going to be doing the programming for us in the next 5 years? So is it worth pursuing at this point? And if you were, what would you do? Contribute to open source, or how would you go about it?
A lot of questions and a lot of thoughts. I'm going to start with, I guess, the AI one, because maybe that's the more pressing, because then they all can build off from there. Should you even get into development because of AI? My answer is 100% yes. AI is not going to replace all development. And let's say, I think web dev right now, like basic web dev, I'm talking like not even, like it can't even do mild React apps. It can probably do simple ones, but then you can obviously look at something like Facebook, which is probably like, I don't even want to know, like probably something stupidly complex, like beyond what React was probably intended for, right? Pushing the bounds of every limit. I don't think it can contribute to a source code like that efficiently without a lot of handholding. So I think web dev is probably the only part of development that may struggle, again, for basic functionality. And then obviously, as it gets smarter, as it gets more advanced, it may start dipping into the more technical, like crazy stuff, like maybe a little bit more sophisticated web apps, maybe a little bit more sophisticated backends with some ORMs and connecting to a database and auto importing Supabase imports so it can connect to your cloud database, right? All this stuff could very well become very accurate and very streamlined. But again, that's all very, in my opinion, kind of basic level stuff. Those are projects that you can do on the side as you try to learn development, or those are projects that you can do on the side in college or as an intern. So, as many years as it would take the AI to get that skilled, I feel like entry level people should know how to do that anyways. So, if you're at a point in your career where you're like, this is all I do though, like I've been at this for 3 years and this is what I do, am I going to be replaced? I think the sad answer is yes. So you need to upskill your work as an engineer and start doing more complex things, or at least more broader things that, maybe there's a project that no one wants to touch because it's legacy and it's running on something that, I don't know, like it's maybe deep dive into it and refactor it, or like look into a way of making it yours. So that way, you're a little bit more solidified in your position and you're more of a guarantee than you are, than AI just completely wiping you away. So I think that's probably like overall the only at-risk department right now is, like I said, those kind of more low-hanging fruit, easy, simple, anyone can kind of achieve type of apps and type of positions. But the more complex and like rich your architecture is, and the more, I guess, legacy your app is, it's probably more safe, at least for a very long time. But there's also more than just web dev, and there's more than just creating Go REST APIs. Like development is huge. You can create video games. You can create AI. You can compete with the thing that's trying to replace you, right? You can make it like a fun race. I don't know. Like you can develop hospital like firmware equipment, right? Like you can even go the full computer engineering route and apply programming to other pieces of tech like 3D printing or electrical guitars or MIDI controllers, music, sound production, movies, right? All these things, like programming is everywhere and you can apply it to anything. And so that should never be a deterrent to get into an industry like that, because you can take that skill and apply it across so many places. It doesn't just have to be building React apps.
Fair enough. Yeah. Bravo. Good answer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that was something that Eric and I were kind of talking about a little bit too. Is just more so it's a skill that at least would be translatable in terms of just the engineering thinking and just learning how to think like an engineer, and maybe not so much specifically like React is a popular thing right now, but like just the complexity of learning to code, and then the skill of learning to solve problems more so than anything is probably going to translate to a lot of other things as well. So there's a lot of value just in that.
I think, and maybe this is a hot take or not, I think just as much as they need to bring back home ed classes to schools, they need to make programming a mandatory course, because we're in a day and age where everyone would benefit if they know how to do even just a little bit of programming, because it's just everywhere. And with the way that we're, treating IoT devices and smart homes and, Wi-Fi, internet, Bluetooth, and now AI, like it's like technology already is our whole life, but it's becoming so much more than just what it is that I can't tell you how many times I'm the tech support for me, my friends, my family, everyone, right? Everyone's coming because I'm the only one who knows how to do this stuff, which I'm happy to do and I'm happy to help. But like if everyone even just had a little baseline understanding of computers, just a baseline understanding of how, these pixels on the screen show up, and then maybe how to debug them or how to do a little programming, then that would change everyone's life, I think, for the better. They could do their own stuff and then maybe even play around and, mess with things more, right? More creativity, so to speak.
Eric, any additional thoughts?
Definitely in on bringing home ec back. I loved home ec class.
Yeah.
It was good. It was, surprisingly useful.
Yeah. It helps when your dad was a chef, so kind of picked that one up pretty quick. No, I mean, I loved home ec, honestly. I think I agree. I would challenge it only in one little aspect of it, and it's kind of what we were hammering on a little bit last week. When you interview candidates, right, are you looking more for them to answer the exact question that you're asking? Like, are you looking for question, exact answer, or are you looking for question, well thought out discussion, right?
I think it depends on the question. If I say, like, let me think of a very direct question. Like,
tell me a time you built a component that called an API. right? Like,
Yeah, right. You want an exact answer. You don't want like,
do
well, I
you?
was sitting at my desk. I think it was third year of college, and I just got this assignment from school. Like, dude,
Yeah.
stop. you know, give me an answer. Like, stop stringing me along. Right? Yeah.
Okay.
But obviously, if of course there's questions that require a lot of ingenuity and forethought and thinking, that like you want to see how they solve the problem, or you want to at least hear how they went about their thought process in answering your question or coming up with a solution. So you want those details, you want those connections. Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting at, right? Is it does us a lot more good. And there's certain things where you really need to know that they actually know the answers. Like you want to know that they actually can, I don't know, write Go syntax. Like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it won't be novel to them first day, but like it also depends on the role, right? If it's like if you're talking like an associate level, um, you know, somebody fresh out of college, you probably don't care as much about do they know the syntax.
Yeah.
Do they even know, like, some of the even intermediate functionalities of things for threading and weight groups and Go functions and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Sorry, Go routines. But more like if you ask them a question and tell me about a time you built a component that calls an API, the root of that question is not trying to get them to tell you about that time they built this component that made a get call. It's like walk me through. It's kind of like what you just said. It's walk me through like how you approached it, how you went about like gathering the requirements, because we're engineers, we don't necessarily gather them, but we groom the requirements, right? Like what questions did you ask? How did you go about it? How did you test it? Did you add error handling? Basically, just listing out a whole bunch of things that I've had to deal with recently. But you want to get that thought process, and the whole point was really coming back to this idea of if you're going to teach programming, I would say don't teach programming, teach the engineering mindset as best you can. Now, there is a limitation there. Not everybody's going to have that engineering mindset, just like not everybody has that creativity mindset.
Right.
So that's a bit interesting, but I'm right with you. Engineering is one of those skills that I think Jay made this point. Like, if computer engineering went away tomorrow because AI took over, engineering mindset translates to all kinds of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, really long-winded way of saying I agree.
Yeah, I think, and that's why I think it could be a nice parallel with like bringing home ec back. Like you have your home ec class, then your programming class, because it could just be that engineer problem solving, big picture to small, and then small to big. Just being able to view every problem like that, and not just as a problem. How do I fix it? It's like, well, is it the problem? Maybe it's not. Like dig deeper. Maybe the underlying problem is something else. Maybe it's something you never thought of, and you have to ask. The common corporate is the 5 whys, right? Ask those 5 whys. Because you may think you know the problem, and it's not going away, and you're like, okay, I'm stuck with this now. Like this is my life. It's like, well, maybe you're just attacking the wrong thing. Maybe you need to ask yourself those 5 whys and get to the actual root cause, which you have to deal with all the time in programming, right? The first bug or the first error is usually never the end of the story. There's always another one, then another one, then another one. Then you finally get to that last bug, that last issue, and then it's gone. And then the actual thing is fixed. But it takes a lot of that digging, a lot of that troubleshooting, and just applying that, top down and, small to big way of viewing the problem.
For sure. I do feel like in that sense, programming has kind of been like a huge advantage, I guess, as far as I kind of just like a bonus, getting a ton of extra iterations on problem solving, where it's like, I mean, you just deal with so many little problems over and over and over and over again that you just get used to that. Like just deal with the problem, like find the solution to that problem, find the solution to that problem. And then it just becomes expected. Like there are going to be problems. I just expect the problems. And which I don't know, just it's a nice translation to life where it's like, oh, like there's just going to be problems. I just fix the problems. As opposed to people that have not had to deal with as many problems, like they get faced with a problem and then they're just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And it's like, at this point, you've gone through like so many thousands of problems a day that it's just like, I don't know, just like deal with the problem and go on to the next one. So
it's taught me a lot of patience, like I used to be the developer who would just rage quit when the program wouldn't work, or delete the repo and start over and follow a different tutorial. Just like, this isn't working. I'm done. I'm trying another tutorial. This guy's stupid. He doesn't know what he's saying. Right. On to the next video. but then obviously over time, as you mature as, as a person, but also as a professional, I don't know, I feel like at least I've stopped doing that. And now it's more like you just have so much more patience because like you said, you're just faced with it so much every day, all day. You just know that it's honestly such a crazy rare, but beautiful moment when it works first try. Like you're just like, wait, there isn't a problem. And you get kind of
Right.
suspicious. You're like,
Right. Like there
this
has
is
to be.
weird. Like this
this
isn't
has
how
to
it's
be.
supposed to be. Like,
Nope, still don't trust it.
Right.
yeah, like it shouldn't work first try. What are you talking about? There's no error. Like what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nope, never.
So
But I think there's another thing to that though. So the patience. So we're talking about like how do you get into development, right, or engineering professionally? But then obviously, then the next question is going to be like, how do you make your way up? And so patience has to be a thing. Not taking stuff personally is a thing. Like code reviews, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I know I've probably given Will. I'll pick on you. I'm sure I've sent you some code reviews that you could have taken personally if you wanted to. You wouldn't, obviously, but other people do, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's not a question of somebody's integrity or talent or anything like that. It's just like there's a standard, and we want to stick to the standard. But building up the fault tolerance of you get patient because you've learned over time where the errors are. You make less of those errors up front, which means when you do see an error, there's a whole list of things you can mentally just check off immediately, right? I didn't do that. Although sometimes you did do that.
Yeah,
right?
I forgot you did that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I would never have left, put the bracket in the wrong place, which completely made this entire loop just run in, nobody's ever done that. But like understanding that fault tolerance and having that, and you basically do all of that stuff up front so that you're not coming back later on and having to add error handling. You're just handling errors. One thing I really like about Go is the fact that if you declare an ERR variable, you better use that ERR variable.
That's pretty
cool. I love that. It's
annoying
very good.
at first when you're just trying to like scaffold something.
Right.
But then it's like, no, you know what? Fine. I like it.
Yeah, I to build off that, I think keeping or staying in the industry and performing well or getting better. Just having that experience and due diligence and patience through digging into the errors, finding those solutions just builds up an incredible experience that either is a unique experience that only you have on the team. Cause like I said, you could be working in a certain part of the project that no one else touches. So now it's like very valuable to have you and you're very excelling and you're doing great. And you're like the knowledge source, which, is a topic of its own. Cause that's very fragile for the company to have all of one's knowledge in one person. And especially if it's not written down somewhere. But I mean, if we're just talking about the personal self, I mean, that's great because now it's like, you're hard to get rid of and you're doing really well. And you have all this information and all this experience dealing with problems in this system. You can address them, especially if you can address them quickly. But then beyond that, it's just the avid curiosity to always learn. Like, I think that's what's going to really create better and more experienced professionals, especially in development, is just this avid curiosity to never be done learning because you aren't. And people who think they know it all are wrong. And if you're sitting there going, yeah, I can code a React app. What else is there? Like, I'm just really good at React. I should be fine. I mean, there's more than React in the world. Like, sorry, like you need to reach out to other places, maybe learn more about, cloud infrastructure and how it gets deployed and managed and scaled with networking, and then learn about security and TLS and making, client and server side certificates, and just broaden your horizons and get curious and keep expanding what you're capable of, because you definitely don't want to get locked down into just a typecast developer, because if AI gets good at that typecast thing, then yeah, you are gone, and that's not good.
A lot of people who are professional script kiddies. Need to start doing some tutorials on some other stuff because
exactly.
No more copy paste.
Yeah. Now that's actually, dude, that's a great point. But I did mention this earlier, right? I wanted to come back to just as a point, platform developers. I'm not talking about any specific platform, but I'm just more of like person who gets certified on a platform or just makes a career out of like a single thing. I feel like that sort of trend is starting to, I don't know, just sort of like phase itself out, right? Like,
it's
I remember
tough.
when I first got started, it was like if you were if you had your MCSE and you had, you got your, what was it, like A
Was
plus
that Microsoft certified?
software engineer, I think.
Okay.
Whatever that was. But there was all these certifications, and it was just like companies were looking for certified developers, like you were certified on this thing, on this platform. I feel like that's becoming a thing of the past because it's just everything. It's just it's not as much of a thing anymore.
Things are moving pretty fast. It's hard to commit to one platform when there's another new platform, the next week, or there's platforms that are shutting down or whatever. So
yeah, I think there's maybe two main reasons why that's happening. One, there's a lot of developers these days. Like the pool of engineers who want to get hired is huge, and then there's engineers who are currently employed and looking to move. So the competition is massive, and you have people at all levels, and most of them are all competing for the same job. An inexperienced amateur who just came out of college versus a senior who wants the same job at Microsoft. Sometimes that happens, and that sucks. And
that's tough.
It's tough. And the reason why these platform engineers or these trick ponies are kind of phased out is because there are people who can do it all, and they can do it all really well. So if you're competing with that person, you have to be able to do it all, and you have to be able to not just be a one trick pony and a platform. Because if they're applying for the same job you are, and you're like, I can build the best React app, you're going to love me. I can make React so well. And this other guy's like, I can do React too, but I also can scale your infrastructure on Kubernetes and make sure you're locked down with security and TLS.
Nice.
I know who I'm hiring. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you got to be able to broaden your horizons because you're competing with people who can and who will. So it's a competitive market. And so that's why you have to level up yourself as well. And so I think that's the big one. It's so competitive, and there's people out there who can already do it. And then the second is just because companies aren't on one thing anymore. Like Jay, I think you're basically hinting at it, where it's just like no company builds one thing anymore. Like they're either acquiring companies that live on different platforms and have different stacks, or they're building different services with different stacks trying to keep up with the times. Like their old Java app is now being migrated to a cloud infrastructure that runs in this whole microservice architecture, right? So these phases happen even in long-term enterprise, and so they're not even on one thing anymore. So it's like there's so many domains that you have to be touching as a developer. You have to be flexible at your job. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Well, and I was just thinking like, platform wise, like you can become Salesforce certified, but then there's HubSpot, and then there's Monday.com, and then there's ActiveCampaign, and then there's a bunch of other competitors that, each one has its own, advantage, disadvantage, and they're moving between them, and they're constantly competing. So it's like, it's also hard to commit to just one when, you don't know, like the company has its reasons for being with any of them or all of them, so yeah. Awesome. Well,
it's a hard market, but it's beautiful. So they're in development.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. There's a reason why it's competitive. It obviously offers a lot of benefit. So
there's also a quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it. Sorry, okay. One last thing, but I'm going to try and say it the best I can. Programming, to at least me, and I think probably a few others out there, is one of the few things where you can physically create what you imagine. Right? Obviously, art and sculpting and metalworking, and there's lots of artistic disciplines. But in the field of STEM, and I guess in the field of like the job market out there today, like programming, I feel like is a great way to take whatever you're thinking up here and just shove it onto a screen or make it a reality in your hand. Again, through more hardware, 3D printing, and all that stuff. But like you can truly create what you imagine, and you can do it quite easily, honestly. With just a few tools and some lines of code, and there's your website. And now you're creating content, and you're out there in the world to be seen, right? Like it's like right there, and it's pretty powerful and cool that a job like that can exist and pay well all at the same time.
That's true too. Yeah, it's a nice combo right there. Some creative elements with the some nice monetary benefit. Eric, any other rebuttals? Yeah.
How do you rebut that? I mean, like just beautifully. Stating what we do day in and day out puts some shine on.
Yeah.
Not every day is, compile error free, rainbows and sunshines. But,
all right. Yeah. It has its ups and downs. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But now I'm just going to think of that, Will.
Exactly.
I am manifesting my imagination.
Yeah. Realize your visions.
Don't know if I imagined this thing that processes 1 million row CSV, but Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Didn't imagine being on a release call at 12:30 at night on a Friday.
I mean, it's details.
You're watching the manifest. You're watching it be birthed into production on that night at 2 in the morning. You know.
There you go. There you go. Just an opportunity to hang
Yeah.
out with your
It won't be
coworkers a little bit
optimistic.
more.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's
Awesome.
an opportunity to sit there and talk about air disasters for 2 hours while we're waiting on status updates.
Mhm.
Oh man, yeah, entertaining for sure. All right, well, that is the hour mark for us, so we could probably call it on that. So this is
Nice.
a nice long conversation about all kinds of things again. So a little bit of framework talk, a little bit of getting back into the industry again, and the beauty of programming. So it's pretty good one.
Mhm.
Any other final thoughts?
Oh, random, final, non-sponsored.
All right.
Bubbly has a lemon. I don't know. Do you say sorbet or sherbet or is it sorbet?
Sorbet.
Yeah.
Probably.
Again, not sponsored. Bubbly has a lemon sorbet that I was hesitant to try. It's very good. So if you see it, give it a taste. It's interesting, but it's actually pretty good. I like it.
Actually, LaCroix has a limoncello or something like that. Same thing. It's almost like a lemon creaminess. It's kind of weird, but it's not bad.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's
Right.
surprisingly good
for no sugar. It's interesting, surprising for sure.
Yeah, way off, but that was my final thought.
I mean, if we're sticking with drinks, I'm a huge fan of this Coca-Cola spiced.
Really? I've seen ads for it.
Really good.
What is that? I've not heard about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that what you were drinking?
No, this is Sunkissed Orange.
Oh, Sun. Okay.
0.
Oh no, never mind. Will was drinking a can earlier, so
yeah. No, I think I was drinking it last week. It's really good. I was not expecting much at all.
What is it?
With these gimmicky Cokes that they have every now and again, but
yeah, it's just their new one. I've seen tons of ads for it, but I thought the same thing, Eric. I was kind of like, all right, it's just another gimmicky Coke. Maybe I'll eventually, if someone hands it to me, I'll sip it, but I don't think I'll ever buy it.
No,
but now with that, I was gonna say with that reputation, I mean, maybe if I see it, maybe I will buy it now just to give it a taste.
Nope. Laura came back from the store, Coke Spice in hand. Here you go. Got to try it.
Wow, nice.
Went to the store. They had it on sale for I don't even know how many. Buy this many, you get this many, and it was like, okay, I will buy that many.
Wow,
so
nice.
Is this like a Dune thing? Spice Dune kind of deal?
I don't think there's no Dune marketing on the can.
Okay.
I think they're just hinting. Yeah, I think they're just hinting at like kind of like a Dr. Pepper spiced cherry flavor. I think that's kind of what it's supposed to be about. But
I didn't put that together. I mean, timing is interesting, but
yeah,
right, yeah, interesting. Yeah,
got spice on the mind.
Yeah, I don't remember any. I don't remember any Dune. I'll check when I go upstairs.
Yeah, I don't. At least the commercials, there wasn't any Dune marketing in the commercial. So
I would imagine you would know if they were doing that. So yeah, I don't know. I'm out of the loop. I guess I'll have to try it. I hadn't heard anything about it. So.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. And unlike your bubblies and your LaCroix, it has flavor, which is a positive thing to a beverage.
I can't remember. Somebody described it as like it's like drinking water and someone else has peeled a lemon in the other room. So yeah.
I think mine is. It's like if you took the old school packets of Kool-Aid, the powder, and sprinkled in like 3 or 4 granules.
just a touch,
like just enough so that you know it's there somehow. Like you can feel its presence.
Yeah.
Exactly. What else do you need? It's perfect. Oh man, awesome. Well, that seems like a good cap for episode 4 of the DevSync. Awesome. Well, we will adjourn for now, and then we'll move on to episode 5. I don't know. We'll have to come up with some good topics in the meantime. In the meantime, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.